with empty shelves at retail stores, waiting 3 days for a break to fill, or driving across town to find out your hobby shop closed at 4 when you always have a card show in your pocket. With Loop, you can instantly buy cards, packs, boxes, or into auctions with the click of a button, and do it all while chatting with some of the best personalities and the best community in the hobby. Download the Loop app now on iOS or Android. Loop, a card show in your pocket.
Y'all ready?
Stripes Live Hall of Fame edition, back with the usual suspects: Isaac Azoot, Eli Sussman, Daniel Rodriguez, and Alex Carver. Noah could not join us today, but we have a very familiar face, Ethan Podowski, former Fish Stripes member, Fish Stripes alum. He is now with Just Baseball Media, and he is doing his own podcast, Big Hall Talk. Ethan, welcome back. How are you, man?
I'm great. I'm out here still in San Francisco. Can't quite get away yet. First of all, I'm very impressed that I come back and we've got a full-on ad. That is wonderful. We're making the big time here on Fish Stripes Live. Disappointed that I didn't get a little feature with a little video of me from back in my day, but it's good to be back. I missed you guys. I'm proud of what you guys have been doing, growing the show and keeping the show alive during the off season, and looking forward today and looking forward to my eventual debut on Marlins Jeopardy. I'm very excited about that. So it's good to be back.
We do have a lot to talk about, because it's Hall of Fame. There's so many guys we're going to get into. And I think the best way to start is let's get on the guys with the final year on the ballot. And you know where I'm going to go with this. Barry Bonds. I'm going to start here with Ethan, man. Why is Barry Bonds a Hall of Famer?
Well, I mean, it's pretty simple when you really break it down, and it's that he's the greatest baseball player of all time. And there's just something to be said for the fact that it's not a Hall of Fame unless you have the greatest players ever, right? And I talked about this on the podcast where at the end of the day, it's a museum to the game, and it's a museum that's supposed to tell the story of the game, and you can't tell the story of the game, especially from about 1988, 89, whenever Bonds started playing, until 2007, without talking about Barry Bonds and his greatness. There are so many things during that era that Bonds was involved in, whether it was just the four MVPs before all the steroid allegations, the home run races, 2001 when he hit 73. It's just, if you can't have the greatest player ever and you can't have the greatest pitcher ever not in the Hall of Fame and call it, try and push this idea that it's a museum to the game. So at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to happen. And it's going to be a shame. And I hope it happens eventually, maybe on the veterans ballot or something like that down the road where they let these guys in. But it's not going to happen now. I don't think he's going to need some real momentum or a revolution on the private ballot basically to get in. But yeah, what else can you really say about Barry Bonds? I mean, I have my own segment on the podcast where I just throw out ridiculous Barry Bonds stats at people, and all of them, you can't rule any of them out because of how good he was. So, him and Clemens should be no-brainers. They should have been in 10 years ago. But it is what it is, and we are where we are.
Isaac, we all know that Barry Bonds has had his past with steroids. He's actually never tested positive, if I'm correct, for steroid. Does that matter to you when it comes to you choosing if Bonds is a Hall of Famer or not?
Well, no, I was sort of really a question right back at Ethan. And, if let's say Barry Bonds, obviously he is one of, I don't know if the best, because I think, Babe Ruth has something to say about that. But Barry Bonds is, holy crap, 162 WAR. That's ridiculous. The fact that he's not in the Hall of Fame is preposterous to me. But I guess if he had, let's say, been tested positive twice, like you were talking about pre-stream, does that change your vote?
This is a great question because there has to be certain thresholds where a guy was good enough, right, to kind of like get through, weather through the storm, right? So like Alex Rodriguez is a guy that's in his first year on the ballot this year, and he was so good. Like he's an 113 or something like that F4 player, right? And you're looking at it and you're like, well, with Manny was kind of, I think he would be in normally, but it's more borderline than like say A-Rod, whereas A-Rod without the steroid allegations is a clear first ballot Hall of Famer. You know what I mean? So it's tough in that regard. But yeah, I mean, I just think like he's so good, and the stats and the numbers and everything is just so overwhelming at this point that it would really be hard, even with a positive test or two, to say. All you have to do is look at what he did before the steroids, and he already had a Hall of Fame career before that. And I see Alex Carver shaking his head.
Exactly right.
Yeah, it's he checked every box. He had 2 Hall of Fame careers, basically, right? And it's like Tom Brady, like what Tom Brady did. Like if Tom Brady came out all of a sudden and he was doping the entire time, like nobody's going to say Tom Brady shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame because he had 2 Hall of Fame careers in his career. You know what I mean? And Bonds did the same thing. And there was one before the steroids and there was one after the alleged steroids. And it makes it overwhelming in a sense, I would say.
Well, I mean, if this was updated, recently, apparently it was today, 80.6%. It looks like he's on track to be elected this year, right?
So you have to kind of take this with a grain of salt, the public ballot, because the public ballot is always going to be the younger voting demographic. They're the ones that are more, with social media
voters too, right?
Yeah, and it's going to be a lot of first-time voters, and the first-time voters are the people that think more like me about the ballot and everything. And so Bonds is going to do really well. I don't know if he was sitting over 75% last year before the release of the private ballot. He hasn't really netted a lot of the ballots. What you want to be looking at is the net votes that they're gaining, because they're going to have to gain a certain amount.
Right.
And the private ballot is just going to destroy Bonds, Clemens, A-Rod, Andrew Jones, Gary, some of these guys that like the younger balloting likes, the analytics with issues, like all those guys are going to be done hard in by the private ballot. And then guys like, Schilling and Biscell and some of the other guys with other problems might do pretty well on the private ballot. But I mean, A-Rod, like sitting at 46.9, there is no chance he comes anywhere close to that. Yeah. A-Rod might get 20% of the vote. You know what I mean? So Kent might do pretty well on the private ballot. But Clemens and Bonds, I just don't think they're on a good enough pace. Like they would have to be pacing really, really high on the public ballot to avoid what's going to, overcome what's going to happen to them on the private.
That's a shame.
Yeah. For those of you that care about the math behind this, I think at this moment, there are 98 ballots in this tracker. That's being held by Ryan Thibodeau. He's the guy that's been tracking this stuff for about 7-8 years now. And there's expected to be more than 400 guys and women that cast ballots for the Baseball Writers Association of America. So we know less than a quarter of the vote so far, but this far in, I mean, even though that doesn't sound like a lot, usually the rest of the group beyond that doesn't deviate that much, except for really lowering the percentages. Like at this point, pretty much across the board every single year.
Because a lot of the guys that vote small hall, kind of, I differentiate between big hall and small hall. A lot of the small hall guys are going to vote for private ballots. So those are people that think like you shouldn't vote for more than 3 people a year. Somewhere in there, somebody's going to have an Omar Vizquel only ballot. You know what I mean? Like
even nowadays,
there's some crazy ballots in there where like last year, Torrey Hunter was like saved by the private ballot. He was not pacing above 5%. And then got saved because the private ballot came out. And apparently everybody loved Torrey Hunter and Tim Hudson on that. And they were saved by those ballots. But it's an interesting, you really see the difference in ideologies between the public and private vote. And you can kind of figure out what's going on there in terms of the younger demographic and the older demographic that votes. And then you do have a lot of, the older demographic, like Tim Kirkshin is public with his ballot, John Heyman, guys that have become more involved in social media and stuff like that. But yeah, there is a big, big difference between people that vote privately and people that vote publicly. And it's pretty split about half and half in terms of there'll be like 200 public ballots and then like 200 private.
Yeah, and I just want to get into the stats of Barry Bonds. I don't think I mentioned everything, but he did have a 162.7 WAR. This is his career stats. I think it's the highest WAR out of all of these guys. He had 2,935 hits, 762 home runs, 298 batting average, 444 OBP, 607 slugging, and a 1.051 OPS in 22 seasons of play. He was a 7-time MVP, 14-time All-Star, a home run derby champion, 8-time Gold Glover, 12-time Silver Slugger, 2-time batting title, and he was a 3-time TSN Major League Player of the Year. So, and this guy is.
If you go to the Giants store at Oracle Park, which I did the other day, they don't let you print Bonds jerseys because he owns the rights to his name. So I was asking about, getting an old player, and they would not let me print Bonds. I didn't try to print Bonds, but they were like, "Are you going to print Bonds?" And I was like, "No." And they're like, "Good, you can't do that." So that's the kind of relationship that MLB left with Barry Bonds, the way that they burnt bridges with him because of how he was treated.
That's why he's not on MLB The Show either.
Not on MLB The Show, was never on MLB Baseball. Yep. That has no – he still hangs out with the Giants, and obviously he was the Marlins hitting coach for a year there and turned Marcell Ozuna into a great player. And he is always at Giants games and stuff with Willie Mays a lot. But, yeah, it's very it's ugly. It's ugly.
If I remember correctly, it's John O'Dowd.
John Dowd.
Yeah,
he was a legend. He was a legend on that game.
I think the same thing is with Jose Fernandez. You can't pronounce his name at Marlins Park Lone Depot Park.
That's crazy.
And just finishing off, he had 73 home runs in 2001. So I think if I'm correct, the closest one to get to that was Stanton with 59 or
Roger Maris.
No.
Roger Maris had 71.
Okay.
That was the record that Stan wanted to pass. He was like, that's one that Stan publicly voiced saying that's the record. That's the record. It was 62.
Just to reiterate before you move on, Kevin, from Barry Bonds, Ethan's exactly right. The Hall of Fame is not the Hall of Good Guys. If it was the Hall of Good Guys, Jeff Conine would be in there. It's not. It's the Hall of it's the museum that tells the story of the game of baseball. And the question that voters, when they sit down with their ballots, that I can't fathom them doing this, can you tell the story of baseball, especially during that time frame from like 1998 through, I would say, like 2006, right, without Barry Lamar Bonds? And the answer is unequivocally no. Yeah. Like I told you guys before, and some of you guys are too young to know this. I know Eli remembers this. Ethan, you probably do as well. That during those time frames, they were cutting in 2001 when that home run race was going on. They were cutting into in-market action on Marlins games and games around the country, and it's all that was on ESPN. Anytime Mark McGwire was hitting, anytime Sammy Sosa was hitting, anytime Barry Bonds was hitting, and it again happened when Barry was going for 762. So again, I mean, this guy was fantastic before and after steroids. Ethan mentioned this as well. Like you can look at the numbers, like before his first accused case, which was in 1998, right? If you go from 1986 through 1997, the numbers are this: 288, 408, 551 with 374 home runs. He was already that amazing patient hitter that he was, 1.28 walks to strikeouts ratio, and he had 417 steals. So he was already one of the best players in baseball. Of course, steroids, I'm sure, helped him. But, and there's a great video from Bob Gibson, and this is the last I'll say on him, is that for the entirety that baseball has gone on, from the basic inception of the game up until present day, you can look at spitballs, you can look at steroids, you can look at the Astros banging trash cans. Teams and players are looking to gain an edge. And if there's an edge to be had, players sometimes can't say no. Barry Bonds couldn't say no to that. Gary Sheffield couldn't say no to that. Does that tarnish their legacy? I think for a player like Barry Bonds, who was great before that, a player like Gary Sheffield, who was great before that, they didn't need it. They did it because they made a bad choice. but that one bad choice does not ruin an entire career. Okay. Or those multiple bad choices. Repeat offenders are worse. Yes. But as you guys said, Barry Bonds never actually tested positive. You know, he was in trouble for it a couple of different times. The Mitchell report was huge on him. But, man, you can't look at that one decision and say that this player, for all that he was and all that he gave to the game and gave to fans, specifically in San Francisco, I don't think you can have the Hall of Fame without Barry Bonds.
And he did it because he had to keep – they did it because they had to keep up as well. You know, they had to keep up with Sosa and Maguire. Like, he made the conscious choice of, I don't want these guys taking all my MVPs, you know. And he – you know, right or wrong, like Griffey made the decision, I'm not going to do it. And Bonds made the decision, I'm going to do it. And that's why people love Griffey, and that's why people don't like Bonds, right? But at the end of the day, you know, Bonds had to keep up, and it was just kind of what everybody was doing. And maybe it's not the best excuse, but it's true that it's just how it was back then. And it has to be there. You know, you can't just try and erase it from memory. Like, there are steroid guys already in the Hall of Fame.
Exactly.
That's the frustrating thing, is the selectiveness. Like, we all love Pudge on this stream, right? Help.
I think it's the publicity, Ethan. Honestly, I think it's the publicity that Barry Bonds got. It was all over the place. This is the best player in baseball, and he was cheating, right? So, I mean, of course it gets blown up because of what happened in the media. And, of course, BBWAA, who votes for this, those were the people that were writing about it. So it's fresh in their mind like it was yesterday. But you can't forget about what a great player this was. And, honestly, I don't know how a single voter can sit down and not bubble in that man's name, because he deserves it. I mean, the steroids is what it is. And like you said, there's guys that are in there already. But, man, unequivocally, you cannot have a building about the story of this game without having Barry Bonds. You just cannot have it. So he's got to be.
Like I said, everybody here loves Pudge, right? He's in. He tested positive, I'm pretty sure. Bonds never tested positive. So the frustrating thing for me, and it's why I started the podcast, it's why I became so interested in this topic, is the inconsistency in voting and just how, you know, backwards it is, where this guy stays out, but this guy gets in because Pudge was a nice guy and he was good to the media. Right. And the media didn't like Barry Bonds. And so Bonds, no way. But Pudge, we'll look past it. You know what I mean? It's just a little ridiculous. So it's frustrating, and you know, it's why there's so much to talk about with this topic.
Right. I mean, writers make it personal. There are those probably same people that there was somebody that didn't vote for Derek Jeter, probably because he was an asshole to him in an interview, you know, like that just is how it is. And as long as these guys have votes, you know, they're going to look at those personal issues that bothered them, and they're going to let that control their vote. And I think that's a mistake. Barry Bonds has to be in the Hall of Fame. A lot of these other steroid guys have to be in the Hall of Fame. There's already steroid guys in there. Give it to them.
Yeah. Moving on to the next guy who definitely needs to be in the Hall of Fame is Roger Clemens, who as well as on the final year of the ballot. This guy, I think, is the second highest WAR on the ballot. He has a 139.2 WAR. His final record as a player was 354 wins and 184 losses, 3.12 ERA, 4,672 strikeouts, 1.173 WHIP. He had 24 seasons under his belt. He was an MVP, 7-time Cy Young winner, 2-time triple crown, 11-time All-Star, 2-time World Series champion, 7 times ERA title. He was the All-Star MVP, TSN Major League Player of the Year. He was also part of that steroid era. I'm going to start with you, Daniel Rodriguez. What can you tell me about Roger Clemens? What can you tell the people about Roger Clemens, and why should he be in the Hall of Fame right now?
I mean, when you look at Roger Clemens, he's, you know, easily one of the best players of all time. He's essentially kind of like Barry Bonds, but for pitching. Yeah. He's also had a career where it's like, you know, he's played in different eras in the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s. And you can make a case for, you know, each of those decades it is a Hall of Fame career. He has, you know, an MVP, 7-time Cy Young, 7. He has one for every day of the week. You know, 7-time, 11 All-Star, 2-time Triple Crown. You know, just like Barry Bonds, you can't tell the story of baseball without Roger Clemens. It's a sham, it's a travesty that he's not in there. And yes, he does have his issues with, you know, steroids and everything. That did happen with him. But again, he's one of the best, you know, probably the best pitcher of all time baseball, one of the best players. He deserves to get in there. It should have happened 8, 9, 10 years ago, and I hope he gets into this year because but he'll probably get into the veterans committee, knowing the best baseball writers and what Ethan said prior about the private ballot.
No, and it's a shame that it actually took this long. Like you said, it should have been 5-6 years ago. I didn't realize how many wins he had. The threshold usually, it's 300 wins and you're in. This guy had 354 wins. That's ridiculous. And the fact that we're talking about him and we're talking about Barry Bonds, and here they are in their last year on the ballot, and the fact that it's looking like Ethan described why they might not get in. They're not going to have that 75% threshold. It's crazy to me.
Here's the best thing about Roger Clemens. And we talked about it with Barry Bonds about how great they were before they were suspected of doing steroids, right? And Roger Clemens is even more ridiculous than everything that I listed about Barry Bonds. The man already had 3,000 strikeouts before he was linked to steroids. Okay. So he already had 200 wins, 213 actually, before he was linked to steroids. He already had multiple Cy Youngs before he was linked to steroids. And because he tests positive, or not test positive, but I think he actually did. But anyways, that he was linked to steroids in 1998 in the Mitchell report. That was his first known use case, or suspected use case. I keep saying that. In 1998, that was where he was first suspected. Before that, he was already well on his way to Hall of Fame. And like Ethan said, these guys got to keep up. And it's especially true for pitchers. If you see home runs going up into the 70s, as he did, what are you going to do as a pitcher pitching in Fenway Park? You're going to try to do something to keep up. As great as he already was, he wanted to keep up. He made the choice to do steroids. Bad choice. Absolutely agreed. He has other character issues, I will say. Early in his career, he was known for throwing at guys. I think his hit-by-pitch stats early in his career hold that to be true. He was also known as not being great to club hands. He was always pissed off if he had to carry his own baggage. So, there is some character issues for Roger Clemens. He went where the money went to. I think that's probably pretty true. But other than that, man, can you have, again, you come down to the question, can you have the Hall of Fame without Barry Bonds? No. Can you have the Hall of Fame without one of the best pitchers of all time in one of the most hitter-friendly environments of all time for most of his career? Absolutely not. Roger Clemens got to be there. Again, the steroids are what they are, but guys had to keep up. So Roger Clemens.
I'm pretty sure that the best season that Clemens ever had was that 1986 season, right? Like 1986. That's how long that guy pitched. I remember him pitching with the Maroon Astros and the Yankees against the Marlins in 2003. And that guy pitched in 1986. And I'm pretty sure he won the MVP that year. It's just an unbelievably long, the longevity of his career is outrageous. Hard to believe he pitched in 3 different decades or something like that. And, just easily one of the, probably the greatest pitcher of all time. When you look at WAR, I think he's up there. It's like him or Nolan Ryan, basically. It's basically take your choice, take your pick.
And I guess the argument, though,
strikeouts is insane.
The argument would be, the longevity of his career playing in 3 different decades. Had he not done steroids, he wouldn't.
Right.
So that's like the argument. I'm saying he should still be voted in, but that's the argument. He would not have come close to pitching that much without the steroids.
Absolutely.
But then
he won a
then
Cy
I would
Young
say,
in every decade. He won in his 20s, his 30s, and his 40s.
It's not just that he pitched in all those decades. Like, he may have been the best pitcher in each of those decades. He may have been like the pitcher of the 80s, the pitcher of the 90s, and the pitcher of the 2000s, just because he had elite seasons in each of those, and even in the postseason too. That was both with the Yankees and some with the Red Sox and with Houston. Like,
the other thing is, sorry to cut you off here. The other thing is, especially with the Red Sox, he did everything that he did that I mentioned in those years before he was suspected of doing steroids on some pretty damn bad teams. Back then, the Red Sox were horrible. And my dad can tell you this because he grew up as a Red Sox fan. The Red Sox used to be the goats of the league. You used to be able to go to a Red Sox game and sit in the bleachers for 75 cents because they had nobody. So Roger Clemens kind of came along and I would say, was one of the people responsible for really making that organization into what it is today, because he was that good. When you were going to a Red Sox game in the 80s, 86, you were going there for Roger Clemens. That's the reason to go. So, yeah, again, a guy that did so much for a bad team like that. Of course, he went on to winners, the Yankees and other teams that he went to later in his career. But for the bulk of his career, he played for bad teams and was a great player on very bad teams in most of those seasons. So, again, you have to take all of those stats that I told you into account when you know that he's playing for not a good organization at the time.
And I mean, Jamie, like you said, Jamie Moyer pitched until like 2012 or whatever, right? But he was getting, piss rocketed every game. Roger Clemens pitched until the mid 2000s, like Eli mentioned, and was still dominant. And it's just, you can play 24 years, 25 years, whatever it is, and just kind of drag along towards the end and just kind of make your way through and pick up your hits and stuff. But Clemens did the exact opposite. He did that and he dominated. And
well, had Jamie Moyer done steroids, would he have been dominant too?
Say again?
Had Jamie Moyer done steroids?
It's a great question. He was working with some different stuff than Roger Clemens.
He might have thrown 70 instead of 60.
Right, exactly.
Shout out to Giancarlo.
Might have gotten up to 75 or something. But
yeah.
Next guy who is on the final year, we talked about him at the start, Sammy Sosa. This guy's a weird case. I mean,
very weird.
By many, he's not in the Hall of Fame. He's actually one of the low guys on there. He's at 22.4% right now. I think many say he was heavily impacted by the steroids, but then he had that 2001 year. I think that's what he's mostly known by, at least me. He had the competition with Mark McGwire. He didn't beat him. And now it's 2001. So was that the year Barry Bonds hit 73 and then it was done too?
1998 was that
year
home
was
run race with
98.
McGwire. 2001 is when Bonds set the
okay,
record
okay,
separately.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, let's start off with Isaac, man. What are your thoughts on Sammy Sosa? And is he someone that should be in the Hall of Fame or not?
I thought that was a curious case because I was talking about this with Eli earlier privately, and I wondered why he kept him off his ballot. I kept him off my ballot as well, looking at the stats. And yeah, I did some research on the guy, and his numbers really did go crazy post Roy's era, but he does have the 600 home runs. So I do think he's someone that deserves to get in with the Veterans Committee in the future. I'm surprised, and I think I'd love to ask Ethan's opinion on this, but I'm surprised at how low the percentage is for a guy like Sosa, because 600 home runs is, and he doesn't have less than 2,000 hits. He's got 2,400 hits. So I just thought that was interesting. He has all the accolades as well. Sammy Sosa does, All-Star, MVP twice. So that's what I thought was peculiar about Sosa. To me, he's deserving, but I guess, that vote, my vote, let's say if I did have a vote, it wouldn't make a difference for him anyway.
So Sosa is interesting because you would think Sammy Sosa, you'd look at his numbers when you hear the name Sammy Sosa and you'd see like an 80 WAR and 140 weighted runs created plus or something like that, right?
58.
But you look at his numbers and he's at 124 weighted runs created plus and 60.1 F4. And you're looking at that and you're like, that's already kind of a borderline case, right? Mm-hmm. And then you look at the 7-year peak, and it was incredible. These years from like 98 to 04 or, really 92, except that one year in 97 where he was randomly bad, to 04. You look at that and you're like, okay, that's a pretty long, a lot of longevity there, but some of these years aren't great. I mean, and you kind of look at it and you're like, wow, like he was really, his peak was really, really influenced by steroids. And don't get me wrong, he's a great, Sammy Sosa is a great hitter and he's got some really good numbers on the stats page here. But, I would be inclined to put him in kind of, I'm not really sure where I stand on Sosa. Obviously, it's not going to happen. I mean, look at the number he's got, he's posting right now. But with Sosa, it's just kind of, he was already borderline and then he was just hard done by the fact, the steroids and stuff. But 600 home runs, if you're in the 600 home run club, like you're doing pretty good, and that's definitely a kind of one of those thresholds where you say, okay, maybe, that's an automatic qualifier, but Sosa's not going to get in. And it's a very peculiar case because I'm not really sure he deserves it based on how much the steroids kind of impacted who he was as a player.
Exactly. And we talked about it with how good Bonds and Clemens were before their first known use case or suspected use case. How good was Sammy Sosa before the 1998 season? You guys want to hear the stats on that?
Mm-hmm.
257, 308, 469 with 207 home runs. So he's a 600 plus home run hitter, right?
Right.
400 of those while he was doing steroids. There's a reason. He was also a terrible defender. He has a negative career D-WAR. Let's put that into play too. He was also doing things like putting corks into his bat to gain an edge. So you can't for this particular player, it's not just the steroids, but like Ethan said, how much they did for him. He was not a good player. He was nowhere near a Hall of Famer before he started doing steroids. And then steroids just made him take off, along with the other thing that I mentioned about putting corks in your bat. And for a lot of his career, he played in very small home parks, right? In Chicago in particular. So I think the 22% is probably generous. I would say that that's going to go down because of how much steroids did for this guy and how much they made him into a completely different specimen than what he really was. So that's the reason he's not there. And I don't have him on my ballot. I don't think he deserves it. I wouldn't put him in. And
yeah, that's why I said his career was heavily impacted by the steroids. And going into the last guy, which is very controversial, but it's Curt Schilling. Last year in 2020, said he no longer wanted to be on the ballot. He said some things that people take different ways. And I mean,
you could say that again, Kevin.
On the field, he was a great player. He had a 79.
Yes, it's very hard to talk, Kevin. I'm going to give you a break here. It's very hard to talk about Curt Schilling. I find myself when I'm on the podcast dancing around it because I don't really know how to approach it because it's so hard to talk about the guy. But basically, when you talk about him this year, all you have to say is he asked you to take him off your ballot. So just do it. Just do it. The guy doesn't want the honor. And I don't really want to give him the satisfaction of being like a martyr in this instance. But I also don't really want him speaking at the Hall of Fame and like going up there and, spewing all his bullshit. So he asked you to leave him off. Just do it. It's pretty easy this year. And he's good. I mean, his campaign has gone in the tank. He's netting. I can't remember what his net is from last year, but it's negative in the 20s, I think, at this point, 10s or 20s. So it's really hard, Kev. It's really hard. It's a really you got to kind of dance around it. But yeah, it's very, very, very controversial.
Yeah, taking away the stuff that like you're hinting at, take away that stuff. He spoke very ill about the media themselves, and those are the people that are voting for you. And so the fact that I've totally forgot about that he did say, "Hey, don't vote for me." Forget him, man. I did leave him. I did put him on my ballot just because, dude, the numbers are there. But wow, I didn't realize how horrific of a human this guy is, especially post playing career. But unfortunately, I did keep him on my ballot.
Yeah. Well, with Schilling, I think the word that I landed on when thinking about this is what makes a candidate disqualifying. What really disqualifies somebody from being honored for their baseball career. So with Schilling, there's a long list of indiscretions. I mean, you could start with on the baseball field how he was just like a bad teammate. He, as much as we're learning about his views and kind of dangerous philosophy in post-retirement, I mean, he held some of these beliefs during his playing days as well. And there are some teammates that he's had through the years with different teams that attest to it. It's not a total coincidence that he did bounce around to a handful of different teams during his career, despite his greatness, despite especially his clutchness in the postseason, the type of things that usually make somebody beloved and a leader in their clubhouse, and he never was that. And then, I mean, just going down the list about how the sleazy businesses that he's run, and then just this later phase about being a guy that's influencing people to simply creating conflict for the sake of conflict and just going off the reservation in that regard. Yet I don't know if I could put my finger on anything that is totally disqualifying for him to be in the Hall of Fame. Is this stuff really enough to totally deflect from what he accomplished as a baseball player? Is there a line that he crossed that wants you to keep him out? And so for a lot of the voters, they point towards specific statements he's had against journalists, like threatening the lives of journalists or really condoning people that threaten the lives with journalists, and that they themselves feel directly implicated in that. Yeah. And so for somebody like that, they believe it's dangerous. But again, for me, I don't know if that's necessarily valid points that they're making. I don't know if that, I've seen other sentiment about how it'd be dangerous to let him speak, to give him a podium and allow him to say whatever he wanted, as if he would incite violence if given the opportunity to actually speak at a Hall of Fame ceremony. I don't know if that's rational. I don't know. I can't really fathom that happening. If he actually gets what he deep down, what he's really, really wanted for now 15 years post-retirement, that he would use that platform for anything other than simply to be reflective in the way that any other player was. So for me, like I understand the other perspectives of it, but when I try to draw a line between what's disqualifying and what's not, I feel he's actually on the right side of that, in that if you just want to look at the merits of his career, if you want to look at the fact that pitchers of his generation are really underrepresented in the Hall, like he is on the short list of very best pitchers of the last quarter century, last 30 years, that I would put him in my opinion.
And the worst thing you can do is you can kind of, I mean, you know, you can put something like there's that big long plaque where they write a lot about the guys, you know what I mean? And look, on the baseball merit, there's no doubt about this guy, right? You know, one of the greatest.
That's the point. Like, where's the cutoff?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, one of arguably the greatest playoff pitcher of all time.
Yeah.
What does that say? That has to mean something, right? That you were the greatest playoff pitcher of all time. Like Madison Bumgarner is going to come up, 10, 15 years down the road, whatever. And what are people going to do with the fact that he was incredible in the playoffs and he has, arguably the greatest postseason that we've ever seen in 2014? Schilling had great postseasons time and time again. He has the iconic, bloody sock moment. Who knows what was really going on down there, but an iconic moment in baseball history with the bloody sock. And you're looking at it and yeah, but again, I just think when the way he acted and the fit he threw when he said, when he was like, take me off, I was like, okay, I see where you stand. You know what I mean? And Eli's right. He can say all he wants, that he doesn't want it anymore, and he's happy he got left out, and be a champion for a fake cause or whatever he wants to do. But at the end of the day, this is what he really wants, is to be in the Hall of Fame. Every player, manager, GM, announcer, whatever, this is the pinnacle of what you can achieve in the sport. And he, no doubt, wants it 100%.
Moving on to the first year, guys. I think the first out of the two players I actually saw play in the Hall of Fame, or who won the ballot, Big Papi, David Ortiz. This guy is maybe one of the best Red Sox to play. He was also a Minnesota Twin, but mostly known for his Red Sox days. He had a 55.3 WAR, 2,472 hits, 541 homers, 286 batting average, 380 OBP, 552 slugging, 931 OPS, 20 seasons as a player, 10 All-Stars, Home Run Derby champ, 3-time World Series champ, 7-time Silver Slugger, World Series MVP, and an All-Star MVP. Ethan, it's Big Papi. He's in the Hall of Fame, and he's leading it right now, so it looks like he's going to get in.
So here's the thing, Kevin. Exactly. It's Big Papi. He needs to be in the Hall of Fame.
But he was also tied to
steroid connections to Big Papi. You know what I mean? This is what I'm getting at here, is that the narrative surrounding these guys, like Papi is on a great pace, 82.7%. I think the private ballot's going to like him because he's Big Papi. You know what I mean? So I think he's going to get in. Like he needs a little more help, I would say, on the public ballot before I guarantee it, basically. But that's the whole point, Kev, is that he's Big Papi. He has to get in. I'm not saying you're wrong, because you're not wrong. He is Big Papi, and he does have to get in, right? 541 homers, say what you will about DHs, but Edgar Martinez just got in, so that really opens the door for Big Papi to get in. He was Mr. Red Sox for so long. That organization, when they won 3 championships with him, right? And through over a decade nearly, and he had so many iconic moments along the way. The speech after the Boston Marathon, and
this is our fucking city, and nobody gonna dictate our freedom.
Exactly. It's an iconic moment. It's what everybody thinks about with the 2013 run. Torrey Hunter going over the wall in right center field on that Big Papi grand slam in the 2013 ALCS. There are so many iconic moments with this guy. But again, it just feeds into the fact that he has steroid links. They're very weird, and they're not like, a reason to really evaluate him on as a steroid guy, right? But he does have links. And so it's like, well, if Barry never tests positive, I don't think Poppy ever tests positive either. Then why is it Big Poppy has to get in? He's Big Poppy, but it's not Barry Bonds has to get in. It's Barry Bonds. You know what I mean? So this is where where really the inconsistencies show through.
Yeah.
With that being said, it's big. You're 100% right, Kevin, that it's Big Poppy, and just like you can't tell the story of Bonds' generation without Bonds, you can't tell the story from about 2004 when they won that first one to 2013, 2015 without talking about David Ortiz.
Yeah, and we talk about those postseason moments, like with that 2004 ALCS where, down 3-0, he gets the walk-offs in Game 4 and in Game 5. You can't tell the story of, this last couple of decades without David Ortiz. And that's a problem. You said, like, he does have some weird steroid allegations, it's same with Bonds. There's no criteria for the Hall of Fame, technically. There's not. Whether it's character or statistics, there's just, what writers want to choose, and that's it. So I think that's where the problem is. People like David Ortiz is a much more likable person. Apparently, he had those moments like the Boston Marathon moment. Barry Bonds was just known to be kind of a shitty teammate. So, and it's so unfair. It's so inconsistent. And I'm glad you started this big Hall talk because someone needs to shine a light on how inconsistent it is. Nonetheless, baseball, I think, is still the best Hall of Fame of all major sports, but it needs to get more consistent because having Clemens and Bonds staring at their final year on the ballot, most likely not going to get in, is crazy to me.
Yeah. Next guy is Alex Rodriguez, one of the more controversial guys. You could go two different ways here.
I don't like
this. Is probably number one. I would think as controversial as Schilling and Clemens and Bonds are, I don't think there's anybody more controversial than A-Rod, because
was he multiple times?
2 times admitted.
He admitted.
Like lied and then admitted. And he was already A-Rod. Like they already hated him. You know what I mean? And he was already like a jerk. And they just hate. And he's done so much image repair. Like A-Rod has done so much image repair in his post career, where he's on every freaking network now talking baseball. But my God, is this a controversial case?
And he definitely has the stats. That's the thing. 3,000 hit club, 600 home run club. He was 4 away from 700. That would have made his case even better. 295 batting average, 380 OBP, 550 slugging, 930 OPS. The guy is a 3-time MVP, 14-time All-Star, 2009 World Series winner, 2-time Gold Glover, 10-time Silver Slugger. He won a batting title. He was a 3-time TSN Major League Player of the Year. I don't think he makes it this year, Ethan, but maybe in the next couple of years, definitely. He's definitely going to make it at some point.
He's not.
Kevin, what's a shame is that you guys can make the argument on A-Rod for unanimous. Had it not been for all the other, those are unanimous numbers.
I think maybe he may slip in.
Like if Jeter was one,
he was hated a lot. That's the thing. And then
Jeter was one vote shy of unanimous, A-Rod would be unanimous. And unfortunately,
A-Rod, Bonds, Clemens,
they would all be unanimous.
Baseball merit, they would all be unanimous. But Kevin, I'm sorry to shut you down. Like I don't want to.
It's okay.
The reason that I say this so emphatically that A-Rod is not getting in is because Bonds and Clemens aren't going to get in, and that's going to set the precedent. And I know that the voting demographic over the next 10 years is just going to keep getting younger, so it could help A-Rod. But there are going to be a lot of people, I can tell you right now, that are going to be protective over their Hall of Fame, are going to clutch their pearls, and they're going to say, A-Rod's not getting into my Hall of Fame. And it's because of it's Alex Rodriguez. Just in the same way that it's Barry Bonds, and people didn't like Barry Bonds, people did not like Alex Rodriguez. And he has 2 known instances of cheating, of steroid usage. Daniel Alvarez, we all love Daniel Alvarez. He's been very popular on Twitter today, right?
He's a loser today, but he's a winner in general.
He is a loser today, but he was on Big Hall Talk a couple weeks ago. And I did a great episode with him, and he's going to have a ballot in 10 years. So I think his first ballot will be A-Rod's like 9th or 10th year, right? He's going to have the chance to vote for A-Rod. And I don't think he's going to do it. but he did vote for Bonds or Clemens. So that just goes to show that there are going to be people that will vote for Bonds, they'll vote for Clemens, they'll vote for Poppy, they'll vote for Schilling, but they won't vote for A-Rod.
It just delegitimizes everything, man. It sucks.
100%, Isaac. It's a huge problem with the voting process that this is the reality is that people vote for the guys they like. You know what I mean? It's just what they do. And it's frustrating. And it's why I have the podcast about it, because I like to call it out. And I hope that I'm lucky enough one day to be able to use my vote and do what I can to help the guys that deserve it, because I care a lot about this process. And I hope that I haven't bad talked the VBWAA enough to not let them for them to not let me in and not give me a vote. But it would be an honor and a privilege. And people don't use it as a privilege. They take it as a right. And I don't think it's a right. I think it's a privilege. And I think more people should treat it like a privilege and use their ballot to vote for baseball merit and vote for the best baseball players in history to make the Hall of Fame.
So Ethan, hypothetically, 10 years from now, let's say you're voting for the Hall of Fame and this is A-Rod's last year. Do you vote for A-Rod?
Yes, probably. And I'll tell you why.
At least you're consistent, you know.
Yeah, there has to be a threshold for how, like Eli talked about disqualification. There has to be a threshold for automatic qualification as well. You know what I mean? And like Manny Ramirez, very good hitter, Hall of Fame quality hitter, player. Okay, maybe, but very like close. You know what I mean? It's kind of borderline. I would put him in, but it's just past the borderline, let's say. But two tests, for me, disqualifies a player like Manny. Disqualifies a player like Robinson. Like when Robinson Cano is on the ballot,
forget it.
And it would have happened before because second base has to be judged a little differently.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But A-Rod is just so good. There's just no doubt about the hunt. It's 113 WAR, you said, Kev, right? Like something like that.
I think anytime you have 600 and 3,000, that
should be an automatic qualifier. I mean, Barry Bonds doesn't have 3,000 hits, and he would have gotten 3,000 hits if he was, if he had not been blackballed from the league. But A-Rod has 3,000 and 600.
Yeah.
So Carver, I see you itching to get in here, so I want to hear what you have to say.
No, I guess I just want to play maybe devil's advocate, but not really, because I kind of disagree with what you guys are saying, and I disagree for this reason. And I've said it this whole show, and I'll say it again. But I think when you're looking at steroid guys, they can't just be, okay, you did steroids, but you were great, so you're getting in, or you did steroids, so you're not getting in, right? I don't think it should be either one of those cases. I think it should be looked at about how much the steroids did for you. And you can make the argument that Alex Rodriguez was probably using steroids for his entire career, right? So we don't know what kind of player that Alex Rodriguez would have been if he wasn't on steroids, because he was likely on steroids for most of his career. And that's obvious in the fact that he tested positive twice and admitted to it. So again, you have to look at what exactly doping did for a player. And I think it did a lot for Alex Rodriguez. I would have loved to see what kind of player Alex Rodriguez was if he wasn't on steroids. I don't think we ever really saw it. Mm-hmm. So based on the fact that there's very little evidence as to the kind of player that he probably was naturally,
right?
I don't think you can put him in the Hall of Fame, and you definitely can't put him in first ballot. 100%. Absolutely not. He cannot be.
I think there has to be a distinction. There, I don't make distinctions between like fourth ballot and 10th ballot, right? Like, there's no difference to me. If you would vote for a guy in the fourth year, you would vote for him in the 10th year. So just vote for him, right? But first ballot is a distinction that means something to me. And I can understand.
You're talking about putting him next to Jeter, putting him next to Ken Griffey Jr., right. Mariano Rivera. You cannot do that. Like that cannot happen.
And so I just think that there can be a distinction between first ballot guys and the rest. And so personally, if you vote for A-Rod, great. If you don't vote for A-Rod, great. I really have no problem with either because of the two. It's twice, and Alex makes a fair argument with that. You know what I mean? I think that's not something I really ever considered, but it's totally fair. And I can see. I'll accept either argument with A-Rod. This one is much less egregious to me than Bonds or Clemens for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he was just such a skinny kid, and when he was with the Mariners, are we sure that he was on it his entire career? I'm ignorant to the fact.
It's very interesting. We don't really know.
We don't know when it started.
We'll
He's not going to go out and tell. He's not going to go out and tell us because no matter what he says, whether it's like, "Oh, I started in year 7" or "I started in year 1," it's not going to go well for him.
He's going to shoot himself in the foot. Absolutely.
And that's the thing. Like, there are some worst cases. Like, you're right. He lied. Like, he did test positive twice. I don't think there's a worst case. Obviously, I don't think this player is a Hall of Famer. But Ryan Braun's problem, that was like the worst one. He lied directly to the camera multiple times about saying I would never put it. And then he tested positive. What was it, twice as well? That was the.
So Rafael Palmeiro.
Why do you think I hate Ryan Braun so much?
Ryan Braun was the worst case, and wow,
the thing with A-Rod, and that's the last thing I'll say because I know you got to go on, Kevin. The last thing I'll say is you kind of have to expect the worst. I mean, it's a multiple time offender, right? He came into the league and started really playing full time at the height of the steroid era. So if you're this scrawny little kid, as you said, Isaac, and this is staring you in the face, right?
What are you going to do? I would do something,
right? And you see McGuire, you see your heroes doing it. You see McGuire doing it. You see Bonds doing it. You see Sosa doing it. Are you going to do it? Probably. So I don't have evidence of that. I with A-Rod, personally for me, I expect the worst. And I say that he was likely using steroids for most of his career, and it made him the player that he was, which is why I personally leave him off.
All right, we're going to get through these next guys quickly. There's Crawford. Then there's Prince Fielder, who his career got cut short because of injuries. I think one of the sadder stories. He definitely could have been a guy to talk about in the future. Ryan Howard, pretty much the same thing. Career got cut short. Then there's Tim Lincecum, and I'm going to let Daniel take this one over because I know he wants to make his Tim Lincecum rant why he should be in the Hall of Fame. So
can I just say something really quickly?
The freak!
You know how I mentioned how I was at the Giants store?
Yeah.
The jersey that I got is Tim Lincecum.
Let's go.
That's the one I got. And it is now the crown jewel of my – this was more like a Tim Lincecum jersey. It is now the crown jewel of my collection. Nice. Because I've got a big jersey collection, and Tim Lincecum is now the crown jewel. So, Daniel, talk to me about my boy.
I'm big on Tim Lincecum because he's easily probably one of my favorite players of all time. For me, my favorite pitchers easily go Jose 1 and then Tim Lincecum number 2. What this guy did, even though it was a short amount of time that his peak was, it was literally a peak that hasn't been seen before. When you look at maybe a guy kind of like a Sandy Koufax, and I'm looking right here. You look at it; it's guys with 2 Cy Youngs, 3 World Series titles. It's Sandy Koufax, Jim Palmer, and then Tim Lincecum. That kind of just says it all. And then it says most seasons, with 225 innings pitched, 160 ERA plus. It's Randy Johnson and then Tim Lincecum. Johnson did it 5 times, Tim Lincecum did it twice. And, he had a short peak. It's around 4 or 5 years, but in that time, 4-time All-Star, 2-time Cy Young Award winner. His WAR really, you see it's not really there, but and also talk about postseason, and he really dominated also in that postseason. When you look at it, he had especially in that 2012, 2010. 2010 is really when he dominated, really, especially in the NLCS and the NLDS. I personally am a big believer in Tim Lincecum. I don't think he'll get the votes just predominantly on just how much he played and what his peak was. And just, his time on the Angels, his 2015 season, 2014 season, when you look at that, it's not really the best in terms of his numbers. But I personally think Tim Lincecum's a Hall of Famer. Just what he did for the sport, he was almost the face of baseball, the face of pitching for a couple years. You'll see him everywhere on TV. He really shaped baseball for that really short amount of time. And, for me, he was one of my favorite players. And I know maybe some of you guys are fans of him too, but I think Tim Lincecum's a Hall of Famer. And in another sport where you kind of look at a similar guy like that, Terrell Davis was a Hall of Famer for Denver. He played maybe 3, 4, 5 seasons, 3 seasons for his peak. That's where I see it, Tim Lincecum. Doesn't matter about the longevity. It just matters what he did and what he played, in that amount of time. And Tim Lincecum was an ace. He was an all-star, one of the best pitchers, if not the best pitcher in baseball during that amount of time. And that's my case on Tim Lincecum. If I had a vote, he'll get it every single year. That's my guy. and I'm sticking to it.
I was going to say, Daniel, like, that was a good point about like in another sport, like in basketball, for example, someone like Tim Lincecum, they probably get in, but this is the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame where it's very difficult to get in. Like, I'm curious, if you had an actual BBWA vote here, would you actually vote Tim Lincecum in? Because I don't think he's going to go over 5%.
I would do it. I would give him the vote.
You can't play favorites, man. You're a journalist.
Isaac, I'll tell you this. I think there are guys every year.
9 years.
I'll just say this: there are guys every year, right, that are first year guys that are not going to make it, but they deserve to stay on the ballot. And
Posada did, and he did.
Yeah, and I think that Tim Lincecum is absolutely a guy that deserves to stay on the ballot because if his career wasn't derailed by injuries, and he didn't have this big dip in velocity, and it just kind of fell apart after like Daniel said, those four or 5 years, whatever.
Yeah,
he was absolutely going to be a Hall of Famer. I mean, those 4 years are 4 of the great years that we've seen from any pitcher in his generation. And I want to vote for him because he's big time Timmy Jim, and I loved him growing up, and he was just such a lovable player and such a Daniel is right. He was one of the faces of the game with the long hair, and they were winning championships. He was one of the faces of the league for a few years, and then it just kind of, obviously the injuries kind of derailed him, and it never got up. And there's a part of me that wants to vote for him, but I just kind of hope somebody else does it for me because he deserves to stay on. He deserves that 5%. Him and I think Ryan Howard, Mark Teixeira is another guy this year I think that deserves
Teixeira more so than the other two.
He has a like a solid really solid case, honestly.
Is Teixeira a steroid guy also or no?
No, I don't think so. And I didn't realize that he was like a 3 to 5 time Gold Glove winner or something like that.
Yeah, he was a good first baseman.
And he was a very good defensive first baseman and a great hitter and has like 50 WAR or something. So I looked into his case because I wasn't sure how much of a case he really had. But I would say those 3 guys, Howard and Lincecum, because of the fact that they kind of, they we're on a pretty good track, especially Lincecum for a long time. And then he was kind of derailed because of injuries. Howard, not as much really. But those 3 guys, I would say, are the guys that you look at on the first ballot this year.
Then what about Prince Fielder?
Well, his career was cut short by
Fielder's weirder, argument. But I wouldn't personally wouldn't say Fielder belongs yet. Didn't go quite that far, but Fielder was really good and would have been really good.
Argue. I do think like Daniel said, that Lincecum's peak really did more for the sport. But I mean, Prince Fielder in his peak, he was dropping 50 bombs, and he was helping a pretty solid Brewers team. Very
unfortunate because he could have been a really great player for a really long time.
Yeah, it really was. But the argument could be made for him that he doesn't deserve to fall off in the first one. So I just feel like if you start playing that game that, he doesn't deserve to get in the Hall of Fame, but he deserves to stay on, it's a very slippery slope.
That's fair.
A lot of these players. Crawford, I saw your boy, you're, first of all, a shout out to Just Baseball Media. Your TikToks are phenomenal. I learned so much in just 30 seconds. Carl Crawford was one of the most prolific offensive players and one of the best defensive left fielders, in a long time. So that's someone else that you can make the argument for. So I think we got to be careful when we start discussing, he deserves to be on another one. Because Jorge Posada was a perfect example of someone who deserved to be on for much longer. Because everyone's saying Buster Posey, for sure Hall of Famer. What about Jorge Posada?
Mm-hmm. All right, moving quickly through the next guys in the first year. There's Justin Morneau, there's Joe Nathan, Jonathan Papelbon, which we have to get into that one later, but I think that's going to go with Billy Wagner in a bit. Jake Peavy, AJ Pierzynski, Jimmy Rollins, and Mark Teixeira. Those are the other guys on the first year ballot. Let's move on very quickly through the other guys who are on the ballot. Bobby Abreu, that's an interesting case, and I think we'll touch up on it quickly. Ethan, what are your thoughts on Bobby Abreu? At the moment right now, he has a very low vote. It's like 12%.
Daniel Alvarez loves this guy because he's Venezuelan and Bobby is a very, very, very underrated player. You do not realize how good Bobby Abreu is. A lot of people don't realize how good Bobby Abreu was. And he was overshadowed by a lot of great right fielders in his generation. Guys like Larry, Ladd, Bonds, of course, Sosa. But his numbers match up pretty comparably, pretty well to those guys, right? And so you kind of look at it and you're like, wow, this is a really great player who on a weaker ballot, this is a really strong ballot. Like there's a lot of guys, but next year, obviously you can't vote for Schilling and Clemens and Bonds. I didn't say Bonds. So there are like 3 guys that drop off. Abreu could be the guy that if you want to vote for 10 guys every year, that could be on the ballot next year that is not on it this year because you have an extra vote and you say, now looking at this updated ballot, who would you vote for? Probably Bobby Abreu would be the first name that would come to mind for me because he has a very solid case. And if I want to vote for 10 guys every year, Bobby Abreu definitely slides right in to the next group that I would vote for.
Next guy is a very familiar face to Marlins fans. It's Mark Burley, who pitched one season for the 2012 Marlins. I won't get too much into him, but he is a World Series champ. Then there's Todd Helton, who has a good case because of Larry Walker getting in. He played in Coors Field, I'm pretty sure.
Todd Helton has a good one.
Todd
Helton has a great case because of how great he was, and his case will now be helped by the fact that Larry Walker got in, because people are going to say, screw it, there's already somebody that played in Coors Field in, so let's put Todd Helton in. Great player, deserves a ton of recognition. I'm glad he's doing really well. That's a good percentage for Todd Helton in his 4th year on the ballot. That might drop a little bit from the private ballot, but great player. Probably would have been the best first baseman of his generation had a guy named Albert Pujols not been around, at least in the National League. But that Albert Pujols guy was pretty good. So Helton, top 3 first baseman in the NL or maybe in all of baseball for his generation. That should pretty much be a qualifier, I would say.
2,500 hits, 60 WAR. The numbers are there, and the longevity of his career is also there.
316 batting average, hit 372 one year, 372. That's insane,
And he also sort of, he kind of retired, not exactly on top the way Ortiz or we'll get to other names like Kelsey. He kind of he didn't, he's not doing the Pujols downward spiral. He retired still, hitting pretty well. So that's something that I like to keep in mind as well.
Then we got Tim Hunter, Torrey Hunter. And then there's Andrew Jones. I know you like this guy, Ethan. I think on your pod you said that this is a guy who you would campaign for a lot to get into the Hall of Fame. And I think most of us voted for him. We'll get into the ballots after this, but your thoughts on Andrew Jones, and then we'll keep going.
I love this guy. Best defender since Willie Mays, maybe best defender ever. And it's just kind of how good do you have to be on offense if you're that great of a defender to be on my ballot? I think Andrew Jones was good enough offensively, and Omar Vizquel was not good enough offensively in terms of how great their offense was. People forget that Andrew Jones has like almost 450 home runs. I know he hit 257. That's what everybody gets mad about, right? But with that defense, like 10 Gold Gloves, 437 home runs, and a positive weighted runs created plus, I think it's like 111 or something. I know Carver doesn't like this case as much as I do, but Andrew Jones.
No, I reviewed it because I was on the fence. I was like, that's that offensive stat line, man. I don't know that this slash line. The home runs, yeah, definitely, but was he good enough elsewhere? And you make the point with the defense. I mean, he's basically Giancarlo Stanton at the plate, or was Giancarlo Stanton at the plate in those days, with absolutely amazing defense. Like, you weren't going to find a better outfielder in those times, maybe with Griffey, maybe. But Andrew Jones was right up there with Griffey in terms of defense. And, man, like, you can't say no. I have him on my ballot. I think he deserves it. Like I said, hitting reminds me of Stanton. Ton of power, not enough average, but the defense does it. And just to go back really quickly, I know you're going quickly here, Kevin, with Todd Helton, you have those really skewed splits, the platoons for home road, right? But look at the defense. Todd Helton was not good on defense, a negative DWAR player, -2 actually. So is there enough with the skewed splits and the bad defense? I say no.
Interesting. I know you love that era of baseball, Alex, so I kind of thought you would be a big Todd Helton guy. The splits are a little more egregious than like a Larry Walker. Larry Walker's splits were like epic, and he only played like a third of his games at Coors Field or something, whereas Helton played all his
whole career,
half his games, right? Half his games were at Coors Field because he played his whole career with the Rockies. But Helton was he's just a great player.
That's why I didn't love the comparison, with Helton and because Larry Walker got in, because Larry Walker is a much superior player.
Yeah, for sure.
Honest. And like you mentioned, the different teams that Larry Walker played on, and I think Helton is the perfect example of someone that's going to be on the ballot all 10 years and should just be a Colorado Rocky Hall of Famer, not a major.
Todd Helton, by the way, career 330 BABIP. Just something to keep in mind.
Interesting. Todd Helton. Hey,
to me, he's a Colorado Rocky Hall of Famer. He is the epitome of a one-team Hall of Famer. It helps him that he played from 97 to 2013, I think it was. But
if you look at some of the batting averages, I would love to do a Todd Helton episode. Actually, I think I'm going to do that.
He's really close, right? He's right there close. I think ultimately, when it comes down to it, looking at everything, played with Colorado's whole career, the splits, the defense. There's just slightly more of a case for me not to check his name than to check his name. So it's very close, though. I wouldn't blame anybody for voting for him.
The next guy, very quickly, Andy Pettit. I don't know. It's a weird case. I don't think he gets in. It was just weird just seeing the stats from the start. I don't think he has any Cy Youngs either.
Put a picture of his intimidating face, and that's it.
Yeah. The next guy, it is Manny Ramirez. The stats are there.
That's a fun one.
The 2 PEDs don't get him in there.
The 2 PEDs. I didn't realize it was. Is it 2 PEDs for Manny?
It is 2 positive
ones. So
yeah.
Not only that, Alex, it's the 2 PEDs as well as being an asshole off the field. So
yeah, like Eli was saying before about Kurt. Yeah, this Manny being Manny. I'm of the opinion that Manny being Manny was bad for baseball, and I'll tell you why. And you can't have somebody that was bad for baseball in the Hall of Fame. I know Red Sox fans love him. I'm sure I have my dad screaming at me.
I respectfully disagree,
man. Right, but I think that his whole attitude and the way that he was arrested for assaulting his wife. He was nearly arrested for assaulting a traveling secretary with the Red Sox. He showed up to practices late. He took himself out of all-star games and said he was injured when he really wasn't. Like, he didn't want to be around the game any more than he had to be around the game. And part of the time that he was around the game, he was detrimental to the team that he was on. He left the Boston Red Sox in disgrace after he did what he did that I just said. And then he just went wherever the money was for the rest of his career. And when his career ended, he retired in friggin' disgrace, right? Another accusation came out. He just said to the Rays, okay, I'm retiring. Like, just walked out on the team. So it's a very bad character issues, more than Curt Schilling, because Curt Schilling is what he was after the game. He goes on Twitter. He's on Facebook. He's making a fool of himself, in my opinion. I agree with Eli. I don't think he did enough to completely tarnish his legacy and take away his Hall of Fame spot. Especially maybe from the BBWAA, because I don't think anybody's gonna, now that he's asked people to take away the vote, like, I don't think he's gonna get elected. I highly doubt it. I think he probably will get in Veterans Committee because his career was that good. But Manny just did too much detrimental stuff. I mean, he was selfish. Like, goes into the Green Monster during a game, that cutoff play that he could never explain. Like, you can do so many things with this guy that he was just detrimental to the game of baseball. I think Ramirez did enough to tarnish his name and take away his vote.
Right, I agree, but he wasn't only detrimental. At the same time, he was one of the best right-handed hitters.
And the stats are there. Yeah, agreed. You're absolutely right. The stats are 100% there. 500 home run club. Defense was crap, but other than that, offensive stats, absolutely agreed. I mean, if he wasn't the asshole that he was during his playing career, I'd put him in. But he did enough for me to take away his vote because of who he is as a person.
I don't think it's ever been.
I want to hear what Eli has to say. I want to hear what Eli has to say about this one.
Yeah, I think, for one, I mean, his hitting is like somehow underrated in hindsight, how consistently ridiculous he was. Because there were other players. We've talked about Big Papi. Manny was a better hitter than Big Papi was. He was a better hitter than Andrew Jones, certainly. Who else did we talk about already? He was like as good a hitter as the pre-steroids.
Better than Sosa. Better than Sosa. 150.
Better than, yes. And Sosa is a great name to bring up too, because Sosa is one that just missed for me. And with Manny, I think, it's kind of night and day, even though the home run totals kind of look similar. You look at the overall hitter, the consistency of the hitter from Manny. It's like really a decade and a half where every single year he was one of the very best hitters in the entire league. Alex, I just don't know that whole narrative really holds up that you were putting out there about not wanting to be around the game any more than he had to. He's been playing as of like 2 years ago. He was playing in overseas, whether it was in Australia or in Taiwan or wherever else. Like when it was a really ugly ending to his major league career, getting squeezed out like that. And essentially kind of like giving up on returning to the major leagues once he was about 40 years old because of the PED club, because he didn't want to serve the suspension that he was given the second time around. Like that's kind of lame. It really is. And he's not somebody that I would endorse as a person or as a role model. But in terms of somebody that really did love the game and that I felt more often than not really was enjoyable to watch as well. I don't see anything disqualifying from him on a personal perspective any more so than some of the other players that we brought up. The people that aren't voting for him, and there are, as you see, a whole lot of people that aren't voting for him, it's their interpretation of the PED situation, the fact that he was served 2 suspensions after it was already against the rules. Like he knew the rules and still got thrown out because of it. And there are voters that kind of understandably draw a certain line there where they feel that's just that you can't be redeemed from doing that. So I'm not one of those people. I understand why there are, and he's going to be a curious case long term because I don't know how he's going to be viewed by the next generation, by those special committees. But certainly for the writers, a lot of them understandably have some issues with him.
If any player here were to have disqualified themselves off the field, I think it would be Manny. So, Eli, has any player, in your opinion, have the numbers to be in the Hall of Fame, but has disqualified themselves for their character? Not besides PEDs, besides taking away PEDs. I'm talking, off-field nonsense, like the domestic violence issue, like Manny.
Well, among the guys on this ballot, I didn't think so. I'm sure if you go through the entire list of guys that have retired and would be eligible for consideration, for me, there's just it's a blurry line, but in fact, the blurry line is really thick in terms of all the issues that people may hold against the player, but how those issues don't necessarily keep them out of the Hall, in my opinion. That those don't necessarily just.
So what's the line? That's my
there
question.
There is no line.
You don't have to give it like an actual, okay, if you do this, you're out. I'm not asking that.
Right.
My question is, I think Manny did it. Like, for everything that you just said, I think, and I hold a different opinion than you. That's nothing new. But my question is, what else do you have to do? He did steroids. He assaulted his wife. He assaulted employees. He did stupid shit during games. I just don't. He was all about. I think he's all about himself personally. I know fans loved him. He was also, if you want to go back to playing stats, his defense wasn't great. I can throw that in as well. But just in terms of character issues, right? And the Hall does vote on it. It is in the clause. They want you to vote on sportsmanship and character. I think Manny Ramirez is neither a sportsman and he's a terrible character. So what does a player have to do to disqualify himself from his playing metrics? And Manny had great ones. So what? I just want to know really quick, I guess, what would a player have to do?
What about someone like Jeff Kent? Because right next to him, that's another guy.
I think at the end of the day, it comes down to there's no issues with him on the field besides him getting distracted, but because the stats say it all, he was a good player overall. It's off the field where the issues come in, which is why I don't think he may get in.
I think it was Alex who said this. Yeah, it was you, Alex. This isn't the good guy museum. This is the Baseball Hall of Fame museum.
Right, but you have to still be somewhat of a person, right? You have to still be good for baseball.
Very
and I think he did. It's his personal opinion. You guys can
Manny
all disagree.
Ramirez had a career OPS of 996. That's ridiculous.
Understood, but you still have to be a character. You still have to be of good character, right? You're going to put this guy in the Hall of Fame up against possibly right next to his plaque, right next to somebody like Derek Jeter, right? Right next to somebody like Ken Griffey Jr., right? So you still have to be. You don't have to be Mother Teresa, right? But you got to be a good person, at least somewhat of a good person, to make it into this Hall of Fame. You got to be good for baseball, and I think Manny did enough to disqualify him from getting a vote, and that's just me.
All right, moving on to the next final 4 guys, which I don't think we'll talk about.
He's such a fun killer, man.
That was entertaining from afar. I enjoyed that.
There's Scott Rowland, Gary Sheffield. Who could be the first
can I go off about Scott Rowland for a second?
Go ahead.
This is legitimately, you want a clean case. Somebody in here said earlier that I've seen people say that there's something wrong with everybody, right, on the ballot. Wrong. Scott Rowland is on the ballot. This dude has no character. It seems like no character issues unless there's something I don't know about that has not been I have not been made aware of off the field. leader in the clubhouse, beloved by two cities, so Philly and St. Louis, world champion with the Cardinals, a tremendous baseball player. Like Jeff Kent and Scott Rowland have the same exact hitting stats pretty much. They have the same OPS, and I think one of them has like 1 point higher weighted runs created plus. I can't remember. They might even have the same weighted runs created plus. But Rowland was an 8-time Gold Glover at third base, which is like the third most Gold Gloves of all time. Now he's tied with Arenado, and Arenado's won it every year that he's been in the league. But he's like right behind Schmidt and Brooks Robinson. A tremendous player. Going to get in. Like 72.4. He's not going to get in this year, but he's going to get in the next, I would say either next year or the year after that. Scott Rowland's getting in the Hall of Fame. You talked about how underrated Manny was. Possibly the most underrated great player of the generation that Scott Rowland played in is Scott Rowland. Incredible baseball player. Not enough people recognize it. Absolutely 110%. If you want the best complete case on the ballot when you talk about baseball merit, when you talk about character, I think Scott Rowland is number one. Absolutely amazing baseball player and deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
Moving on to the final three guys, we have Gary Sheffield, who, as I mentioned, he could be the first Marlin to get in. If he gets in, he would be the first one. I think he's on his 8th year, if I'm correct, or his 5th year.
Would he go in as a Marlin? Yeah, right? Or...
I mean, that's
I think so, because people don't realize that the best for his peak, so his 7-year peak, but like is his prime, I would say. The peak of his career was in a Marlins uniform, that 93 to 97 stretch, and not enough people realize that he was incredible here. And I think that because the best years of his career were in a Marlins uniform, I think of him as a Yankee. I know people think of him as a Brave, but I think the best years of his career are in a Marlin uniform, and for that reason, I think he would go in wearing Marlin.
And that's where he won his World Series with the Marlins
as well.
So. Let's talk about one stat to bring up about Gary Sheffield, right? Of every member of the 500 home run club, and this is how much of a pure hitter. Obviously, everybody talks about 509 home runs, right? He hit 500 home runs. It's definitely true. And I know that some voters look down on that now. They say that 500 home runs isn't what it used to be. I disagree. This guy was hitting 23 home runs on average a year. And on top of that, what he did in terms of his selectiveness, how did he hit those home runs? He didn't hit them just because he was the strongest guy in the world or because he did steroids. He hit them because he was selective, right? His strikeout rate career is 10.7%. Of everybody in the 500 home run club, that's the third lowest. And it's behind Mellott. I think Mellott, or maybe not Mellott. I know it's behind Ted Williams and one other player. So you're stacking him up. You're stacking him up against everybody that's ever hit 500 home runs, and he is among that group. Probably, in my opinion, the third best pure hitter. He's got to be there. I mean, he was bad on defense. He's played third base for the beginning of his career and was terrible. He was a little bit better as an outfielder, but not much. His arm was good, but he ran horrible routes. So he's getting in off one thing alone if he gets in, and it's his offense. What will hurt him definitely is his relationship with media, which was horrible. Mm-hmm. He was not good to writers. He just wasn't. He just wasn't, and he admits it. He says, "I always spoke my mind and said what I wanted to because if I didn't do it, nobody else was going to do it." And I mean, you can say that's fine for you, but in that moment and in those moments where he was doing that, time after time after time, he was killing his Hall of Fame case. That's why he's not there. That's why I don't think he will get there. I think he should be there, but because of that is why he will not be there.
We talked about earlier.
One of the best pure hitters ever, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. We talked about earlier with Vizquel and Jones, how good you have to be on offense to get in based off your defense, right? How good do you have to be on offense? Sheffield is kind of the anti of that. How good do you have to be on offense to get in, knowing that you would be far and away the worst defender that's ever been in the Hall of Fame? If you go off of defensive rating, Gary Sheffield on Fangraphs, Gary Sheffield would be the worst defender in the Hall of Fame by 100 points to Frank Thomas. Okay, Frank Thomas is currently the worst defender in the Hall of Fame. Gary Sheffield's defensive rating is 100 points lower than Frank Thomas's, and if he got in the Hall of Fame, he would be the worst defender in the Hall of Fame.
With PEDs and with what Ethan just told us, I don't know if he would have my
100%. I did a Gary Sheffield episode last year, and I recommend everybody going back and listening to the Gary Sheffield episode because I ran through his whole career. I started at the beginning and I ran through it to the end, and then I told you how he matched up against the guys in his career, whatever. That's how I do my like player episodes, right?
If you're comparable in any way whatsoever, if I can mention your name in the same frame of mind and same sentence as Ted Williams,
yes,
you belong in the Hall of Fame.
Correct. And so you look at his career, and he played 21 seasons, and he was good until the end. Like he had like 111 weighted runs created plus in 100 games in the final year of his career, which he only came back so that he could hit his 500th home run. Still played 100 games and was still productive. He hit
an OPS of 823 in his last season.
And one more thing to mention, because I know you're going long on him, but another thing to mention, we talk about telling the story of baseball, right? When I was growing up, and I'm sure Eli's in the same boat, it doesn't matter if you were a Marlins fan or not, and it still mimics to this day. If you weren't getting into the plate in Little League or whatever and doing the bat waggle, you weren't a player. You just weren't. Like, that was it. Gary Sheffield bat waggle was everything.
There's something to be said for
iconic things ever, right?
There's something to be said for players that have iconic things like iconic batting stances, or something like that. And Sheffield, it's just you just look at him and you look at his career and you look at what he did as a hitter, and you just kind of say, that's what a Hall of Famer looks like. And so I think he has to be in personally.
Moving on to the final two guys, which I don't think we don't have time to get into, are Omar Vizquel, who has a weird case, and then Billy Wagner, who you could look at it two ways, and depending how you really look into a reliever. But going into everyone's ballot, let's start off with Isaac's
ballot.
Hold on,
Kevin. Okay. This is how you have to look at Billy Wagner. You have to ask yourself this question: can the best left-handed reliever of all time not be in the Hall of Fame?
I think you should.
That's the question you have to ask yourself.
The antithesis of that, and I think he belongs, just to precursor.
Yeah,
the antithesis of that is, did he pitch enough? Did he do enough? Is there enough of a sample to say that this man is a Hall of Famer? He's one of the most dominant left-handed pitchers of all time, period. You can stack his stats up against Trevor Hoffman. They stack up pretty well. Yep. Hoffman pitched more, right? But even though Hoffman pitched more innings, guess what? Billy Wagner had more strikeouts. So, and it's like over 100 more innings. So probably more than a full season for a closer, right?
He had 422 saves,
Exactly. So, looking at, if you strike out more than a current Hall of Famer that had your same position in less innings, and you had a better ERA, you can look at that too. I think you have to put him in. I mean, characteristics weren't a problem for him. Like, I mean, I know he's like a lesser down name, but man, like, I think it's a very interesting case too, and this is probably for a different time. Like, I think him getting in or not getting in will paint the picture for, like, what exactly does a relief pitcher have to do? Like, if Billy Wagner doesn't get in, Joe Nathan is not getting in, right?
Neither will Papelbon.
And neither will Jonathan Papelbon ever.
So future guys like Chapman and maybe Craig Kimbrell maybe won't get in either.
There has to be a place for relievers in the Hall of Fame because they're such an important part of the game. So you kind of have to judge them on a wing or something. You kind of have to judge them on a different scale. Like, I'm an advocate for the pinch hitter wing. Like, Lenny Harris is going to be the first guy in the pinch hitter.
What about Matt Stairs?
But Matt Stairs, sure. Why not? But you can't, like, Raleigh Fingers and all those guys are in, you know what I mean? And they
Fingers was also
they started in their career, right. But
I think Wagner stacks up well enough with Trevor Hoffman. Actually, I think Wagner was a better pitcher.
If Hoffman is in, then I think Wagner.
Yeah, you have to, right? I mean, it's 110 less innings. He did enough. Put him in.
All right, now let's go into everyone's ballot. We all did make our own ballots besides Ethan. So we'll get into Isaac's.
Mine will be coming eventually.
It will be coming
on the podcast. I'm saving that for the podcast.
I think the best way to do it is, Ethan, you react, and I guess you could give it like a grade or something, A, B.
Okay. Oh, God, no. All
right, I like this. I really like this. I have all the power right now. I love this. All right, let's do this.
All right, here we go.
All right, this is Isaac.
Ooh, I just sort of, went with some of the obvious ones. I don't know how many years left Gary, because, if this was Gary's last year, I would have voted for him. I know you're going to give me a bad grade for not having Rowland in there.
So Isaac, this is the thing. As long as people vote for, like, deserving guys, I'll say it's a good ballot. And you have 5 guys that have legitimately good cases on here, but you don't have enough. You left out Jones, you left out Helton.
I didn't want to vote for Jones. I did leave out Wagner, I left out Rowland, and I left out Gary Sheffield. Those are the 3 that I'll
give it a B-.
A B minus.
because you have
This is your last time on Fish Stripes Live, buddy.
You have 5 very solid candidates that are deserving, but you just fall a little short of really good. But this is a good ballot. It's not a great ballot. I give it a B minus.
Let's get into Alex Carver's ballot next.
This should be interesting.
Yeah,
Alex and I view things a little bit differently. All right, 8 players. Oh, this is good. This is really good. That is high quality.
Yeah, that's a perfect ballot.
That's very high quality stuff.
That's an Ethan Podowski ballot.
There's been a little bit of inconsistency in the discussion today. I would put Helton on, of course. I'm happy you put Andrew Jones on. I'm gonna give this a solid A minus. This is a very, very solid ballot. That's very well done. Very well done.
Daniel Rodriguez's ballot is next.
Here we go.
Okay.
I think I already teased this one earlier.
Yeah, I saw this one a little bit, but I'm going to look over it. 10 guys, always good when you've got 10
I
guys.
get 10.
Omar Vizquel, C minus. You have Omar Vizquel on there, C minus. Sorry. That's an automatic drop of like two grades. Bonds, Clemens, love it. Helton, love it. I really appreciate you voting for Tim Lincecum, doing my job for me.
If there's one person have to vote for him, I'll gladly do it.
Yeah, I love that you voted for Tim Lincecum. I think A-Rod, I would have him on my ballot. I respect that you have A-Rod. I'll give you a C because I like you instead of the C minus. But yeah, Vizquel, after all the stuff that's happened this past year and all the stuff that's come out about him, and just his case in general, I don't really love anyway. I kind of like to joke with people that.
Then you better hold Manny Ramirez to a similar.
Absolutely. So I'm holding
much better off. Totally different players.
This is a very, very good ballot until you voted for Omar Vizquel, and that's why it's a C.
All right, mine's not the worst.
Let's do my ballot, and then we'll finish it off.
Let's see Kevin's. I think Kevin is going to be
16 guys. I never saw any of these guys play. That's my only disclaimer.
All right, so I love Wagner. I love Rowland. Jimmy Rollins.
Yo, come on, man.
We didn't really touch on him. It's interesting. There's something to be said for how great Jimmy Rollins was. Wouldn't really get my vote. This is I'm gonna give this. I love the Jeff Kent vote. The MVP for me pushes him kind of over that Hall of Very Good threshold. Not a great guy though. This is solid, Kevin. I really like Wagner. I'm gonna give you the same grade I gave Isaac for different reasons though. You have more players. I'm gonna give you a B minus as well, just because I think you voted for some guys that aren't as deserving as others. Like if you voted for Rollins, you should have voted for Helton. You know what I mean? Or A-Rod. Like you could have used that vote for A-Rod or Helton.
I wanted to have 10 players. I'll just
yeah.
keep it
No, I respect that, and I personally think that everybody should vote for 10 players because you can't look at any year really. I don't think you can look at a lot of years and say that on a ballot of 30 players that there's not 10 that are deserving.
And then we'll finish it off with Eli's ballot.
Just quick on Jeff Kent, Kevin. Like, I mean, like, as Ethan said, not a great person. Past that, decent on offense, not good on defense, and it's a 17-year career, so not the longest career either. He didn't even get close in my book. Anyways, go ahead.
I didn't know John Franco made the Hall of Fame.
No, I don't think he did. That was our guy Alex Contreras in the chat, but I don't think he's been in yet.
Why the hell is he? Yeah, I was gonna say
this is the ballot. This is the official one, Isaac.
All right, so this is Eli. So Bobby Abreu. I like the Bobby vote. I guess you dropped Sosa. You had Sosa last year, Eli.
I did. That's good memory.
I remember you having Sosa.
I would have voted for 12 guys if I could this year, and that would have included Jeff Kent and Sammy Sosa. But for me,
there are, like I said, making the ballot is an accomplishment of itself, and there are guys every year, at least 10 every year, that are worthy of election in one way or another. You know that 10 guys aren't going to get in every year, so it's okay to vote for 10 guys because 10 guys aren't going to get in. This is well done, Eli. This is really well done.
Jeremy Taché loves
Danny.
I'm surprised about Billy Wagner though.
I don't understand Kent. Like, I got to go back. I'm sorry. I don't
get
it.
MVP.
Like,
it's the MVP, Alex. I'm telling you, it's the MVP.
Ethan convinced me with the Jeff Kent
one
on
on
his
thing is,
pod.
I talked about this before with judging positions differently, right? Like you can't just leave all second basemen out of the Hall of Fame because it's not a great offensive position. It's not like a sexy position, right? Ken is the greatest power hitting second baseman ever, probably. And so you look at that and you kind of say there has to be something for that. You have to be rewarded as a second baseman for being a very good power hitter, which is why Robinson Cano screwed the pooch, because he had it. You know what I mean?
He really
had
did
it
have
in the
it.
bag. He would have been. He was probably one of the great, maybe the greatest second baseman of his generation, and he blew it because he tested positive twice. So for me, Ken, just the fact that he was such a great power hitting second baseman, has the MVP that he beat Barry Bonds out for, rightfully or not. He overshadowed. He had a year where he was, in the eyes of the writers, better than Barry Bonds on the same team as Barry Bonds. I just think that he goes from Hall of Very Good to Hall of Fame.
Didn't Ted Williams have that 409 hitting season and lost the MVP as well? So
MVP
that doesn't
voting is gross all over the place. But
so the
Eli,
MVP is it's not meaningless, but the MVP is it's second fiddle for me. I didn't vote for Ken.
I think that's fair. Eli, I don't think I ever gave you a grade.
You did not.
No A+ is here. Because I would if you're gonna vote for Manny, you should vote for A-Rod.
No,
I'm gonna give you
first ballot.
I'm gonna go.
Come on.
No, I think those are different.
Yeah, I know it's tough. I'm gonna give you an A-. It's a really solid. I like all the other choices though. Rowland, Poppy, obviously. Andrew Jones is great. I really like this.
With A-Rod, he's a guy that I just felt I need more time to really think about it, because obviously with the player, there's no doubt. But with me, when I'm talking about that line of Alex asked me before, and I didn't really answer him about disqualification and what kind of leads into that. The one thing we didn't mention about A-Rod is the reporting that not only did he continue to do PEDs during biogenesis, that he was kind of instrumental in peddling PEDs to other players and like distributing it, and like very prominently involved with that, what was a South Florida based operation. And what he's done, he's created a lot of noise for himself since retirement with his rehab, his image rehab. And it's thrown so much like in my face that I think you just need more time. You need to get 5 years isn't enough to like fully wrap your mind around whether this guy is, whether or not he is one of the rare cases of those players that doesn't belong, that has kind of like ruined it for himself. And there's so much going on that I think you just need more time to really process it all. And it seems that the real voters are totally split on that matter. So,
and it's everything that we said too. Like you can't, if you give, you can't give a guy like that first ballot and put him in the same conversation as guys that have gone first ballot that didn't do basically anything wrong in their careers. So it can't be first ballot. I don't know if it ever will be because of everything that Eli just said, but he's interesting for sure. Me being me, in years to come, I would probably include him, but you can't have him there right now. Absolutely not.
15 years might not even be enough time to just think about it. Because you said 5 years might not be enough. Yeah,
I mean, and there's cases like we can talk about. I mean, I don't want to bring up too much because you're at the end, but we can talk about Pete Rose. Like, how much time does that have to be? Like how much time does Shoeless Joe Jackson? How much time does that have to be for him to get into the Hall of Fame? He's even more than Pete Rose. So you can talk about so many different things, like how long is enough, and will it ever be enough for Alex Rodriguez? And that's something interesting to bring up. Will he ever get in because of what he did? And it's interesting.
Have we talked about Jake Peavy yet? Because that's a guy that
I don't know. I saw his case.
I see things. I don't know. Obviously, I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. I don't think he'll get all the votes, but I don't know. He has an interesting career. He has the awards. He does have some of the stats, but I just want to get quick thoughts on Jake Peavy, or any thoughts at all.
I saw his case. I saw it and I kind of liked it a little bit. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer though, but it was interesting.
He's Hall of really good.
I base my opinions on the Just Baseball Media TikTok page, and Jake Peavy. I thought so that beforehand, and Jake Peavy is not he's not a Hall of Fame.
Your own opinions, Azu.
No, but he's Hall of really good.
Hall of good or Hall of very good, something like that.
Now to finish
Hall of good.
I think the best way to do this is talk about some Marlins that could be in the Hall of Fame in a couple of years. And obviously there's Gary Sheffield, but then there's Stanton. This is one that you guys saw. The
Marlins that could be in the Hall of Fame.
There's
What a
very
ridiculous
little. There's
concept.
very little, but
To me, we had that discussion about Giancarlo.
we had this. Me and Isaac had this discussion, and then on Twitter there was a nice preview to that one. I know Alex and Isaac know about
and it doesn't
that
happen
one.
often, but like Eli disagreed with me, you guys disagreed with me. I just think that if he I don't think he's a Hall of Famer yet, but if he were to continue to have that career of a Hall of Famer, he would have to do so much in a Yankee uniform that he would go in as a Yankee, and all of he's had no postseason with the Marlins. So I think that if he, like I said, if he does go on to have a Hall of Fame career, he will have so much time in the pinstripes and way more postseason appearances that he would want to go in with the Yankees. Not to mention all, like the bullshit that went on when he left. He not the best of terms leaving Miami, making some subtle comments in his press conferences, blah, blah, blah. He would go in as a Yankee. I think there's no doubt in my mind that he'd go in as a Yankee. If he were
Isaac, and I mentioned it before, he is Andrew Jones without the defense. So
right.
If we talked about Andrew Jones. Did he do enough offensively? No.
When you said that, Alex,
he's not on track.
I disagreed. I think Giancarlo Stanton is a better offensive player than Andrew Jones was.
I don't think he's on track. He's 32. It's an injury-prone player. Is he going to do enough in the rest of his career to get in? No, I don't think so. So it's going to be based off of what he's done so far, and I personally don't think he's done enough.
He'll make the ballot, but he won't get in it. I think he'll make the ballot.
And he'll stay on the ballot. He's going to hit 500.
I think the best way to look at it is Stan had his best individual seasons with the Marlins.
So far, yeah, obviously. But then
he's 32. Is he going to have a better season? Probably not.
The best post team success was with the Yankees. Obviously, he made the postseason. He's been going forward there because he never made it with the Marlins. But man, Stan, I think, should be going in as a Marlin. He had 59 homers with the Marlins. I think that's the career high for him at the moment. I don't think
he's not going in at all. The only hope, and I'll say
it's if he goes in.
The only hope we have to get this hat into the Hall of Fame is Gary Sheffield. That's it. That's the only way that a Marlins hat will go in as of right now. I mean, maybe in 30, 20 years we can talk about Jazz Chisholm Jr. or something. That'd be great. But as of right now, the only one close,
boys.
The only one close right now is Gary Sheffield.
And I would say Giancarlo's a close second.
Not close, but okay.
I would say he's a close second. He's gonna hit 550 home runs.
The only other guys that are decently interested, I went through the baseball halloffame.org website. It said future eligibles. The only ones that I saw that were Marlins were Manny Ramirez, Martin Prado, and Miguel Cabrera, which won't happen at all. He's going in as a Detroit Lions.
Yeah. Hanley will be on the ballot, and I think he'll get votes. He'll be a guy that survives his first ballot or something. Probably would go in as a Marlin, right? But he's not going to get in anyway. But his best years were 100% with the Marlins. With Giancarlo, Isaac's point about the fact that his greatest years would have to be yet to come for him to get in. He's probably not going to top 59, right?
At age 32.
But his most consistent years would have to be in a Yankees uniform. But he liked it here until the very end when they treated him bad. You know what I mean?
Well, he disliked it in 2013 too. Remember, he went all right. I'm pissed off.
Yeah, well, I would have been pissed off too.
Yeah, everybody away. That was good. So
his best years. First of all, if he hits 500, he's in for sure because his career is just good at this point. If you add the 500 home runs onto his career, it's good enough. And so I think that if he gets to 500, which I think he will. If he stays healthy enough, he doesn't even have to stay fully healthy. He can stay healthy enough.
He can average one
where he would get 500. He's going to get to 350 at the beginning of next season. I think he's at 347 or something.
He's exactly at 347.
Yeah. He's going to get to 350 at the beginning of next year, and then he's got 150 to go from there. And if he's hitting them at a 30 home run pace, you do the math. So
luckily,
I know one career OPS.
He did have his days as a right fielder in Miami. He was a really pretty darn good right fielder. For most of the time, he was a Gold Glove finalist a few times, and he's going to probably be a DH as a Yankee. So that's will help him stay healthy. And you guys see the shape that he's in. He's a walking muscle. This guy. He might be someone that hits 20, 25 home runs into his age 38, 39, 40 season. He could be someone like that. Marte and him have great same bodies. Just one is smaller than the other. And Giancarlo, I can see him. Maybe he's not the most, he's a little injury prone, pretty actually heavily injury prone. But
very injury prone, yeah.
This comment got commented.
I could see him possibly being a Hall of Famer if he just goes on a rampage in New York. But a lot
any
of shit
pitchers from the Marlins you guys can see in the Hall of Fame? Because there's a lot of hitters. Are there any pitchers at all that can possibly even remotely make
and
it.
this conversation depresses me for obvious reasons. So.
If there was a Marlins Hall of Fame, obviously a lot of these guys would make it. Probably like Josh Johnson.
The only thing that
Dontrell.
we can say, Daniel, to answer your question, the only thing that I would say for that is if he keeps doing what he's doing, and that remains to be seen, is Sandy Alcantara, and that's the closest he'll get.
I still don't even think.
I don't think he'll get in. I mean, he's been excellent, but I don't think it's gonna happen.
Even if he has like 10 more seasons, like the season he had this year, he's still not gonna get him.
I don't think anyone on
He's
the
gonna have
roster
to win a couple Cy Youngs along the way. You know, he's gonna have to
win.
pick a
Yeah,
couple.
he's never gonna win a Cy Young.
I don't think anyone on the roster right now would make it.
Isaac, you're pretty low on this guy.
I
Like,
think Sandy can absolutely win a Cy Young.
He wasn't.
he
even
will win a
Josh
Cy Young.
Beckett.
If he keeps doing this on this track, he will win a Cy Young award for sure.
Sandy's gonna get it.
I hope. He didn't
We
even
talked
get
about when we talked about Cy Young
Yeah.
winners. Isaac, we talked about Cy Young winners. You picked Kurt Schilling, right? You picked Kurt Schilling.
Yeah, I did. Pick
He never
him.
won a Cy Young award.
Right, I'm not.
Never.
Yeah, that's fine. Like, Giants. Why is he winning the Giants part?
So yeah,
No,
I mean,
I'm not saying that. Sandy
it's a
won't be
long track.
I'm
A
not
lot
saying
has
he'll
to
be-
happen. For that to happen, what I just said to happen, I just wanted to give Daniel a candidate, okay? I just wanted to name a name.
Yeah,
because
fine.
it's not going to be
Because of
Josh
Josh
Beckett.
Beckett.
It's not going to be these guys. It's not going to be
Beckett already was on a ballot and fell off a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
Exactly.
he fell off.
And then you can argue that he would be a Dodger even if he did go, or a Red Sox even if he did go in, right? So, anyways, to give him a name, it would be Sandy, and he would have to do a lot to do it. But
No,
I
of
think he
course.
could definitely do
And
it.
just to be clear, I'm not saying he wouldn't be a Hall of Famer because he's not going to win a Cy Young. I just don't think he's ever going to win a Cy Young, unfortunately. Not because of lack of skills or numbers that he's going to produce. Just this year was one of the best pitching seasons I've ever seen in a Marlins uniform. Other than,
You
and
could see
he
more. Who knows?
he didn't get a
Maybe
single
not,
Cy Young vote, not an eighth
Because
place
he's on the
vote.
Marlins.
nothing.
If he was on the Dodgers, he would get a vote. If he was on any other team,
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
remotely.
a contender, at least a
Yeah.
contender.
Gotten to this conversation now. We're having such engaging.
This is a conversation for another day.
We're
But
kind of
if
like
Sandy,
a different
Sandy
podcast.
was-
From
Alright.
Dodgers, he would get a vote. Come on, guys.
if Sandy was on some big market teams right now, he'd be one of the more he'd be like probably one of the more overrated. Well, no, what was that? What was I trying to get at?
Underrated?
I feel that nationally he's still an underrated guy, but it's
Yeah,
gotten to the point
definitely.
where this offseason has been so long that I feel like locally he's getting a little bit overrated. And I think you guys are projecting things on him that he has not done yet, and that I'm not sure he'll ever do. But that's
Right.
for another stream. That's just what I've noticed.
Yeah.
We're not
Some
talking
way,
about 10
somehow,
years
we
down the road.
somehow
I just
got
wanted to
Sandy
give
Alcantara's
Daniel a name,
name.
okay?
Some way, somehow, we got Sandy Alcantara's name in the Hall of Fame talk. But I think this is where we'll wrap it up. It's the final show of 2021. It's actually perfect we have Ethan on here. I don't know if you guys have any good stream memories to talk about, because, man, we had a lot of streams every series. Some of them were depressing, talking about the Marte contract issues. Then we had the trade.
trade
I don't know if
was
you guys
electric.
have any possible memories, but I remember that Jeremy Taché stream when we all did the Happy Buys. That was a pretty good one. I don't know if any.
I think the midstream was a highlight.
Yeah, I mean that was
Getting
an
Mitch
epic
on.
moment for sure. Couldn't. Obviously I've moved on from Fish Stripes now, but 2021 was kind of the year where it all began for me, and very thankful for Fish Stripes for that. And obviously I just wanted to say, since I'm on here, follow at Big Hall Talk on Twitter. That's the podcast.
Definitely.
That's the Twitter for my podcast. Make sure to check out the podcast. It's available on Spotify. It's available on Apple Podcasts as well. It is a lot of fun. I think you guys, if you enjoyed this discussion, you would enjoy my podcast as well. I hope that you all will check it out. Thank you for always supporting you fellas. You guys have all been great to Big Hall Talk and to me as well. And if you guys are out there and you enjoyed this kind of discussion, you like the Hall of Fame, you think it's an interesting topic, definitely make sure to check out Big Hall Talk. Thanks for
Trust me, I did not know anything about the Hall of Fame until I started listening to your podcast. That's the only way I know about most of these guys and the points that you guys are making out here. So, yeah, I think it's time to end it. Final show of 2021, going out with a bang. Hall of Fame. We talked about a lot. We'll see you guys next week, Wednesday. Eli, I don't know if is it Jeopardy next week?
We're going back to Jeopardy, and it's less than a week. It's less than 6 days from now. That's the beauty of having to push this back as much as we did, is that the next one is sneaking up on us quicker than ever. So that's going to be January 5th, 7 p.m., YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. I think we're going to do like 40 questions. It's going to be more questions than ever. We're going to have Daniel Alvarez as our reigning champ. It's going to be a lot of fun.
there. I'm coming on next week.
Oh, that's right.
There we
You weren't
go.
on the,
Good
you
one,
haven't been
man.
on
Yep,
yet. We had Aram on, and
I'll
he
jump
got
on.
booted pretty quickly. He finished in the negative. So I think
I need to make a big comeback this month.
Yeah, Kevin got booted too.
I survived.
No. I have to get negative twice to get booted.
I know.
I survived. I got like.
I finished negative 5,000, Ethan. It was pretty bad.
Yeah,
it was like it was World Series talk from the 2003. But anyways, from Eli, Daniel, Alex Carver, Isaac Azut, Ethan Podowski. We'll see you guys all in the next one. Fish Stripes Jeopardy next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Go Fish. Peace out.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, how about